Audio running. Z50. ZV1. ZV1. Hi, my name's Irrelevant, and on a previous episode, we got this City JCA50H head working for us, and working rather well, and I even did some voicing on it in another episode, and got it actually sounding good. It's been modded, you see, and I was thinking, I'm gonna put this amp back together and enjoy on it for a little bit before I decide what I'm doing with it, except for one problem. It's absolutely useless to me without a variable bias mod, so that is what we are going to do today. A variable bias mod, I'm not sure if that's the right name for it. That's what I've been calling it for the past 20 years that I've been doing this, and I do this to all my amps. Basically, I modify on the amp so that I can have some test points on the outside of the amp to test its bias, and then I add another knob somewhere on the chassis so I can adjust the bias without having to take the amp apart. All my amps have this. I did this mod to my crate, I did this mod to my JCM800, I've done this mod to all my trainers. It allows me to hot swap power tubes on the fly. I could be like, oh, I feel like some KT88s. Pop them in there and play a bit and like, what happens if I put some 7581As in there now? Pop them out, pop those in, look at the meter, twist the knob, biased for a new set of tubes. I could play musical hot tubes on my amps to hear the different flavors. And that allows me to really tone model an amp. It allows me to compare the different sounds of different tubes and how they're gonna respond with that amp and figure out what tube I like on the amp. Because, a lot of people, they just change out their tubes when they get old. They never really flavor test different tubes. And even if you do, having the amp all taken apart and doing the whole rigmarole is just, you've forgotten. You really don't get the taste unless you do it like within moments. So let's tear into it. And in order to do that, I gotta take this board out because I have to get to the underside of these tube sockets here. That's one troublemaking thing about these PCB type amps is it's all very much, stuck together, and this is going to be rather annoying. At least it's the good kind of annoying. If life's going to annoy you, this is the preferred way I would like it to do so. Hey, you know what? Oh yeah. I'm seeing things here. I'm seeing jumpers. Oh boy, we just got in luck. I don't have to take this apart after all. Okay, let's put everything back together and I'll show you what I just found. You need a frickin' lock washer on there, bud. What do you think you're doing? So as I was taking the amp apart, I spied with my little eye into these gaping holes here. And the pins in question here are pin 1 and 8. Now, those are going to have traces together. Pin 1's grounded on this amp, which is good. It means it can take EL34s. And what I often do is I disconnect ground between 1 and 8. I connect ground directly to 1, but then I bridge ground over to 8 with a 1 ohm resistor. And I'm seeing the traces in here, but then I'm seeing a little solder point connected to these two jumpers on each tube. Those jumpers connect the ground to the tube. Oh boy, that is perfect. That is exactly what we want. And also makes us wonder, why the wasted opportunity? But hey, that's making this amp further moddable. So far I've enjoyed the whole modability of this amp. If you find a schematic, everything's mostly clearly labeled and it has these big pads. Like the through hole pads are large on this side. So like you can get a soldering iron onto them and without having to get to the other side of the board, you can usually remove and install components. So in this case, we're going to put a touch of fresh solder in there to get everything nice and moist, and then I should be able to pull that right off. And while it's still hot, let's get the sucker on it. I said let's get the sucker on it. I said let's get the sucker on it. There we go. And these are just weird little jumpers that look like resistors, but they just have like a black on them as if to say 0. I am nothing. Okay, so we got the jumpers out now, and we got the little holes cleared out. There's the next thing we have to do to prep for this mod. And another advantage this amp has is it's got so many jacks across the back. So many jacks. Look at them all. It didn't put a speaker switch in there. It just put a whole bunch of jacks. If we get a nice rotary switch, we can condense this all down. Now, as it stands right now, I have no interest in plugging 2 cabs at the same time in here, and I need 2 chassis spaces to do this mod. So that's great. We don't have to drill holes, but I'm just gonna go down to 16, 8, 4, 3 speaker jacks, 3 impedances, 1 cab at a time. I'll be good. So I gotta pull 2 of these. Or actually, I gotta solder on them first. So we got this brown wire here, which is our feedback wire coming from our 8 ohm. This guy pulls feedback from 8 ohms. That's an extended wire there. Sadly, I'm gonna have to cut it down. Now I'm gonna remove the 8 ohm wire so that I can clean out that hole. All right, put the 8 ohm wire back in the hole. Give it a nice fold over. Now we gotta try to get the feedback wire in there. I don't think that's good to go through the hole nicely, sir. Okay, well, I'll just half-ass it. All right, now we're gonna cut the wire over here for the last impedance tap, and then we'll just move it over a jack. All right then, before things get completely out of hand, we'll relabel this. Oh, of course, I made it too short and too curved. Wow. All right, so 16 stays 16, but now this is the 8 and this is the 4. So now we have to do something about these jacks. They have a ground bus bar going through them. We have to remove those 2 jacks. Get out of there. Now if we just kind of loosen up this ground bus, it should pop right off. Yes, same with this one. Pop right off. So we do need a jack in there, just not that jack. We're gonna be installing a TRS jack. Now I'm gonna leave it in this upwards position here for a moment so that I can clean the contacts and get her prepped. All right, so we're gonna need a couple lead wires to test on this. Any old colors will do. I'm gonna use yellow and blue because I think they're the colors I've used least often, so I got the most of them. And then in the sound industry, a hot color will represent positive and a cold color will represent negative. So we will attach yellow to tip, even though tip would traditionally be left, wouldn't it? Whatever. Blue will be sleeve. All right, those wires are in place. Now I'm gonna shift the position of this guy around so I can get this ground bus wire through there. We just need to do a continuity check to make sure that there's no interference here. So if I tag on to this bus line and then I touch this main ground bus here, yes, we have very low impedance. So we're gonna get an accurate reading here for the most part. It's gonna be good enough. Basically, this ground bus wire ties to the output transformer. These guys all tie to the chassis. Through the chassis, it goes to the star ground. To the star ground, it goes to the main ground bus on the board, and that main ground bus goes to the bottom of the tube. So it's a little bit of distance to travel, but for our purposes, that's gonna be just fine. We will clock this in such a way that that ground bus bar is going to sit in and around the same realm that it did before, so it's still gonna look all straight and uniform. Go ahead and tack that into place. I'm gonna leave that loose in there just in case we want to put it back to normal. All right, so for these guys, current sense resistors. Whoa. So these are 1 ohm resistors. So those are just gonna go through the hole like that. Now we're gonna try to sandwich a piece of wire in there at the same time. So we'll snip down our wire. Get a piece. We need her to go into this hole. Ah, come on, wire, stop splaying on me. Stop fraying. And then hopefully this resistor is going to go through that hole at the same time. Oh, sir, yes it is. That is perfect. Now let's solder that into place. Again, because I'm not sure what this amp is going to be in the future, I'm leaving the leads on my components long so as to not commit them. Even though I think it's safe to say, once I know what I'm doing with it, I will set it up appropriately. And then this guy, same deal. A snip a snap, a strip a strip. So we're putting it through the hole on the tube side of the resistor. We soldered that into place. So the concept behind this is simple. These are on the cathode of the power tubes. That's the negative of the power tube. So here's the cathode, this line here. and we are intercepting the resistor right there between the ground line and the bottom cathode of the tube. Now, the cathode of the tube is always directly tied to ground. All the current that tube's pulling is getting pulled off the cathode. There's a combination of currents being pulled through the anode, the screen, and the what have you, but all the current the tube is drinking is going through that cathode. The process of putting a current sense resistor there is the easy concept that we can use Ohm's law to calculate how much current it's pulling based on voltage drop. So at the end of the day, when we go to bias this amp, we set our meter to millivolts, and it's as simple as connecting the meter to either side of this resistor. And then it's gonna give us a voltage drop in millivolts. Because it's 1 ohm, there's no math. That millivolts directly translates to the milliamps current that the tube is drawing. So what we've done is, half of it is on the tube, the other half is on ground, much like this guy is grounded out, right? And they're all on the same bus. So now I just have to plug a meter into this jack, and then boom, I can read my bias without taking the amp apart. And that's exactly what I do. I have this meter that pretty much lives over on my amp wall with my music gear. It's just always hanging out with my amps, and I have a custom probe. I just plug it in there and I can read with this meter. It's set up for both milliamps and millivolts. So I got this common pass through. So if I have some of my amps that I originally did this mod to, they actually just intercept the current. They don't have the current sense resistor. So they just disconnect the tube from ground and then force it to go through the meter. In doing that, you end up disconnecting half the tube. So I have this bypass here that will do one half of the tube. And then if I want to test, I just switch that around and do one of those. You don't need this in millivolt mode, just go to voltage. I'm gradually setting up all my amps to do the millivolt reading, and I don't have to worry about it. Doing the intercept mode, as I call it, is dangerous because you're taking the full wrath of the tube and you're pumping it through this meter. So like if you are dinking around with this and touch something wrong, you can get electrocuted. With the current sense resistor, millivolt mode, you can't get electrocuted. The load's being drawn through the resistor, but millivolts are actually leaving the chassis. So it's also a lot safer way to do it. So now we have to make this adjustable. And that happens with this guy right here. Which, is it possible for us to see how that pinout is? Well, I guess we'll just have to test on it once we pull it out. There's a good chance we might damage this component because it might take more heat than that component can stand to remove it, but we'll see. You have a 3-legged race here, so desoldering 3 legs from this side of the chassis is not going to be a fun time for this little guy. Oh, but it looks like we're going to be okay with a little bendination. Just have to work it on angles. Fresh solder in there. Everything wet and hot, and lift it right out. Come on now. Okay, she's free. Put it over in the pile of all the other components I've pulled out of here. Now, let us clean those holes. Okay, so based on the schematic, we're dealing in this general area here. This is the biased adjustment. There's a 10K resistor. That appears to be it there. And then it doesn't need all 3 positions. It only needs 2 positions. We got to figure out which 2 positions. So basically doing a continuity test here now. It's probably going to be middle and okay. No, those are bridged. No, those are bridged. So it's the 2 bottom positions here. We'll put a mark on which positions are bridged. So now we have to connect the potentiometer up to that. Spec calls for 50K. This is the only 50K I have in stock, and it's not appropriate because I think it's an audio taper. But it'll work for now. I have some more on order, so we'll have to update it later. How you can tell it's an audio taper. So, we connect to both ends of this little pot, and it's gonna tell us its total value. Now, if I connect, it's hard to tell without putting a knob on it. So, our center position is gonna be this middle lug. We turn it so that it points at that middle lug, and then we test the resistance across the 2 sides. That side's 30K. That side's 16, you see, that's an uneven taper. Halfway is more over there. That's actually pretty good, actually. That might be moderate margin of error. Maybe this is a linear pot and it's just, there's a little bit of slop to it. That or it starts with the click because it's a clicky pot. And once you click it, it doesn't change. So where's the actual halfway point? Right here, and it's 22. Okay, maybe this is linear and we're gonna be fine. We have no use for that clicky, but we're gonna be fine. Now, if we want to turn up the pot clockwise to turn up the bias, turning up the bias means turning up the resistance because what the bias pot does is it takes the power supply circuit here and it regulates it by grounding it out. So the more resistance on this pot, the more negative voltage goes to tame the tubes. As we turn this pot down in resistance, it grounds out more voltage, lets the tubes run hotter. So we want to use the side with the least resistance in the clockwise position, which is this side. So I'm gonna mark the 2 pins that I wanna use. And let's prep this pot and get it installed. Oh, I completely lost that down into the void. Void your warranty, bud. We gotta bend this tab out of the way. So that goes through there some way, somehow. Looks like we're gonna need some combination of washer. Oh, this big lock washer. It's probably gonna rip the shaft right out if we do this wrong. I need to find some hardware for this guy, because like this is just gonna go right through that hole. Somewhere I have some adapter ring. Oh boy. Oh boy, yeah, that's fun. That's fun. How's that gonna look back there? That's gonna look obnoxious. It's perfect. Okay, we'll take one of the stock lock washers. Put this through. Try to get roughly center. Oh boy. Oh, there's not enough thread to get through all that. Not with a lock washer anyway. Okay, okay. This is the best we can ask for right here. Till we get the better pot in stock. Now the way that's set up, it's probably, yeah. Try not to put it on too tight or it's just gonna rip the pot apart because it's not sitting in there. It's not sized properly. Unless we could sandwich 2 washers, which we can't. All right, so now we have to connect this to there. Correct? Correct. I'm gonna use a bit more yellow. Get it in the hole, and solder that wire on. That's going to be in either one of these holes here. So it doesn't really matter. As in the 2 bridged holes. Use a white wire for the next one. And we're gonna kinda do it the same way they did it in their wiring spec, as in we will bridge these 2 contacts together. We will prioritize the center one. Let's pre-tin this a bit. There, just like that. That half soldered in there, that half soldered in there. All right, we now have a bias pot, yay. Now we just have to connect it down here, just like the other one. Get it into that hole, ground it out. All right, I think we're done. Oh, what a novel idea. Completion. It's a very novel idea because my work is never done. I always find more I want to do. So, basically, if we connect to the bottom of this 10K, which is, it should be at ground potential. Yes. And then the top of this bias circuit connects to the 2 220s, R13, R14, which is over here. And as we adjust on this, we have a change. And it has a clicky. Now we're not really gonna bother putting a knob on this. Ideally what we do, we cut that short, or sometimes I put it on the top side of the chassis. So to permanize this mod, I would probably do it just a little bit differently. Like I might find an empty space somewhere over here where I can get at it. You might be removing the board, and that's where I would put it so that it's hidden. Because we got this sticking out here, it could break off, or you could touch it. But with careful handling of this amp, that's not gonna be a problem. So, how does this work now? Well then. All right, so we get in the tubes back into place. We turn amp on, we set it to millivolts. We plug the millivolt scale into the new bias test hole. We let the amp warm up. As the tube warms up, so doth the meter reading. Now you can see there's sweet screw all going on there because we have our bias set to maximum. So let's start turning it up. Oh, look at the number go up, sir. Isn't that nice? I'm gonna set her about 54. It's a little touchy. But now we're biased. And now everything should work normally. So I just give her a quick little taste test, make sure everything's working proper. Yes, indeed, it's working. So to illustrate this, are these tubes hot now? Okay, so how does this work? I have an insulated glove. I turn standby on, which I know in this amp design will cut power to the tubes. I simply pull out the hot tubes, handling them carefully. They're gonna be more susceptible to microphonic damage while they're hot. And then we pop in a different set of tubes. Oh, like these KT88s, Self-Tech KT88s. They just barely fit, but they do fit. Now we turn the power on, let them warm up. I've run KT88s on this particular power transformer many times, so I know it can handle it. Now we're gonna see that number start to climb. We might want to turn the bias down until they reach maximum heat. Now KT88s are higher wattage tubes, so we could probably bias them a bit hotter. But I'm gonna stick with about 45 milliamps with these guys too. Now that's just a number I'm pulling out of my arse. There is math to doing biasing, which, you know, if you're interested in bias mods, you probably know already. Oh, and what do you know? I got KT88s in my amp now. Oh, let's not stop there, sir. How about some 6CA7s? These are some tubes I'm fond of the sound of. They darken up a bright amp. I like them in the crate, sometimes in the Marshall. This amp's not the brightest. Maybe I won't like them in this one. Again, bring them up to about 45. Oh, they drifted up a bit. That's fine. But as you can see, it's just that easy now. I can just play with tubes all I want, find out what I like the most in this amp, and really tune it up for that maximum tone. We even have the option to play with the bias on the fly. Maybe I want it a little bit warmer. Maybe I want it a little bit colder. For aggressive metal tones, you want a tight, clean power amp. So sometimes you might want to bias between 50–60%. Some tubes sound like arse running that cold. You might want to bias them 75%. And well, if you only play at bedroom volume levels, sometimes it does well to bias the tubes a little bit hotter to simulate more of that, you know, how the tube's gonna flow once you turn it up there experience. In which case, I've biased amps as high as 80% when I know they're gonna be sitting still. But either way, this is the way we do things when we're really, really into tube amps and we really want to figure out how to get the most out of them. I've been wanting to demonstrate this mod for a while, but I haven't had the opportunity to do so until now, and here it is on the Scrap Parts Jet City that I found online for dirt cheap, and it's a pretty good amp. So I hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for more. Look, 53. You gotta let the tube settle in a bit there.